Max had never bared his teeth at anyone before, so when the German Shepherd suddenly blocked the apartment doorway at 11:47 p.m. and refused to let Vanessa step inside, Ryan felt something cold twist in his stomach. The dog stood completely still in the narrow hallway, his dark eyes locked on her hand instead of her face, a low rumble vibrating deep in his chest. "Ryan," Vanessa whispered nervously, clutching her purse tighter against her side. "Your dog is scaring me." Ryan immediately grabbed Max by the collar, embarrassed by the scene unfolding in front of the neighbors. For 6 years, Max had been calm around strangers, children, delivery drivers, even loud construction workers outside Ryan's downtown Seattle apartment building. The dog had never acted like this. Not once. But tonight was different. Max wouldn't move. The elevator doors slid shut behind Vanessa with a metallic clang, leaving the three of them frozen in the dim hallway under the flickering yellow ceiling light. Ryan forced out an awkward laugh and tugged harder on the leash. "Come on, buddy. Knock it off." But Max dug his paws into the carpet and let out another growl, louder this time. Vanessa took a shaky step backward. "See? This is exactly what I've been talking about." Ryan felt heat rush into his face. Over the past month, the arguments had become constant. Vanessa complained that Max watched her too closely, that he followed her from room to room, that he sat outside the bathroom door whenever she stayed over. At first, Ryan thought it was jealousy. He and Max had been together since the dog was 8 weeks old, back when Ryan was sleeping in his truck after his construction business collapsed. Max had been there through every miserable night, every panic attack, every lonely drive across state lines looking for work. But now, standing in that apartment hallway while Vanessa's frightened voice echoed off the walls, Ryan suddenly wondered if maybe the dog had changed. "I'm trying to build a future with you," Vanessa said quietly, her eyes glossy with tears. "But your dog acts like I'm some kind of threat." Max immediately snapped his head toward her again. Not barking, not lunging, just staring. Ryan noticed something strange then. The dog's ears twitched every time Vanessa adjusted her purse strap against her shoulder. It was subtle, almost impossible to catch. But Max wasn't reacting to Vanessa herself. He was reacting to whatever was inside the bag. Ryan opened his mouth to say something, but before he could speak, Max did something that made the blood drain from his face. The dog suddenly released a sharp whine, spun around, and sprinted straight toward Ryan's home office at the end of the hallway. Papers crashed onto the floor inside the room. Vanessa's expression changed instantly. Panic flashed across her face for less than a second before she forced a smile. "See," she muttered quickly. "He's completely out of control." But Ryan barely heard her anymore, because from inside the office, Max started barking at the locked desk drawer where Ryan kept the confidential startup contracts worth nearly $2 million. Ryan stood frozen in the office doorway while Max continued barking at the locked desk drawer, his claws scraping desperately across the hardwood floor as if he was trying to warn him about something inside. Vanessa stayed behind in the hallway, arms crossed tightly over her chest now, her expression tense and unreadable beneath the apartment's dim lighting. "Ryan, seriously," she said quietly. "This is not normal anymore." But Ryan barely reacted. His eyes stayed on Max. The dog was trembling. Not aggressive. Not angry. Afraid. Ryan had seen that same look once before during a thunderstorm 2 winters earlier when lightning struck a transformer outside their old apartment complex. Max had hidden beneath the kitchen table, shaking for nearly an hour afterward. That memory hit Ryan harder than he expected because Max had always been the steady one between them. Even during the worst years of Ryan's life, the dog somehow carried a calmness that made empty apartments feel less lonely. Ryan slowly walked toward the desk and crouched beside Max, placing a hand gently against the thick fur on the dog's neck. Max instantly stopped barking, but his breathing stayed uneven. His eyes never left the drawer. "Buddy," Ryan whispered softly. "What is going on with you?" Max leaned against him heavily, almost exhausted, and for the first time Ryan noticed how tired the dog looked lately. The gray around Max's muzzle had become more noticeable over the past few months. He slept more often now. Sometimes Ryan would wake up before sunrise and find Max already sitting alone beside the living room window, staring silently down at the street 12 floors below. At first, Ryan blamed age. Max was getting older, but lately the behavior had changed in ways Ryan could not explain. 3 nights earlier, Ryan had fallen asleep on the couch, while reviewing contracts for his software company. Around 2 in the morning, he woke to the sound of soft whining. Max had been sitting beside the front door in total darkness, ears raised, staring at the deadbolt as if he expected someone to come inside. Another time, Ryan found Max lying directly in front of the office doorway for nearly 6 straight hours without moving except to occasionally lift his head toward Vanessa whenever she walked past. It was beginning to wear on everyone, Vanessa especially. Ryan could see the exhaustion in her face now. She looked nothing like the confident woman he had met at a charity event the previous spring. Back then she laughed easily. She loved rooftop dinners, live music, long drives along the water outside Seattle. She used to buy expensive organic treats for Max and call him her favorite third wheel. But somewhere over the past several weeks, that warmth had disappeared. The apartment itself no longer felt peaceful either. Small things kept going wrong. Ryan's office keycard vanished twice before mysteriously reappearing. Max shredded a folder containing financial paperwork Ryan did not even remember leaving on the kitchen counter. Last week, the dog knocked over Vanessa's purse so violently that lipstick, receipts, and medication bottles scattered across the marble floor, while Max sniffed frantically through the mess until Vanessa screamed at him to stop. Ryan tried convincing himself it was stress. His company was preparing for the largest business deal of his career, and tension had infected everything around him. But as he sat there beside Max on the office floor, another unsettling realization crept quietly into his mind. The dog never acted strangely when Vanessa was gone. The apartment only felt tense when she was there. Then Max suddenly let out a low whimper and pressed his nose against the bottom desk drawer again. Ryan frowned and reached for the handle. But before he could touch it, he heard Vanessa's voice behind him, sharper this time than before. "Ryan," she said quickly, "why is that drawer unlocked?" Vanessa's question hung in the air so suddenly that Ryan instinctively looked down at the drawer handle. She was right. The lock was hanging half-turned, something Ryan never allowed after work hours. Before he could respond, Max shoved himself between Ryan and Vanessa again, his body stiff as steel, while a strange clicking sound came from deep in his throat. It was not a bark, not a growl either. It sounded nervous, unsteady. Ryan slowly stood up. "Okay, this has gone too far," he muttered under his breath. Vanessa folded her arms tightly. "You keep saying that, but he keeps getting worse." Ryan wanted to argue, but over the next few days the tension inside the apartment only escalated. Max began developing bizarre routines that made no sense at all. Every evening at exactly 9:15 p.m., no matter where he was in the apartment, the dog would abruptly stop whatever he was doing and walk directly to the hallway closet near the front door. He would sit there motionless for several minutes with his ears raised before pacing circles around the entryway. Ryan checked the closet twice, expecting maybe a trapped mouse or faulty wiring creating some high-pitched sound humans could not hear. Nothing. Yet Max repeated the behavior every single night. Then there was the elevator incident. Ryan and Vanessa had returned from dinner downtown after trying to repair the growing distance between them. The ride upstairs had been quiet until the elevator reached the 12th floor and the door slid open. Max suddenly planted himself across the doorway and refused to step out. At first, Ryan laughed awkwardly, tugging the leash while another resident waited impatiently behind them. But Max would not budge. His paws trembled violently against the floor tiles while his eyes stayed fixed on the dark hallway outside. Then, without warning, the dog lunged backwards so hard that the leash slipped from Ryan's hand entirely. The elevator doors closed again before anyone could react. Vanessa looked terrified. "Ryan," she whispered shakily, "that dog is not okay." Even Ryan started wondering if something was wrong medically. 2 days later, he scheduled a veterinary appointment across town. But the moment they pulled into the clinic parking lot, Max refused to leave the truck. The dog had visited vets dozens of times before without trouble, yet now he pressed himself against the back seat, panting heavily while staring through the windshield at Vanessa instead of the building. The veterinarian eventually completed the examination and found nothing physically wrong. Heart normal, vision normal, no neurological concerns. Honestly, the older vet admitted while scratching his chin thoughtfully, this behavior feels situational, like he is reacting to stress around a specific environment or person. Ryan immediately glanced toward Vanessa sitting quietly in the corner of the room, but before he could say anything, she stood up and grabbed her purse. So now your dog thinks I am the problem too? She snapped bitterly. The argument that followed lasted nearly an hour after they returned home. Vanessa accused Ryan of prioritizing Max over their relationship. Ryan accused her of exaggerating everything. Meanwhile, Max stayed completely silent in the kitchen, lying beneath the dining table with his head lowered between his paws. The silence somehow felt worse than barking. Around midnight, Ryan finally fell asleep on the couch after the exhausting fight. But sometime before dawn, he woke to a loud metallic crash from the office. His heart jumped as he rushed down the hallway expecting to find broken glass or an intruder. Instead, he froze in disbelief. Max had dragged Ryan's locked office drawer completely out of the desk frame and shoved it halfway across the room. Papers were scattered everywhere. Contracts, backup hard drives, financial reports, and sitting directly on top of the mess was Vanessa's purse, ripped open, while Max stared silently at a tiny silver key that had fallen onto the floor beneath it. Ryan stared at the silver key on the floor, while Vanessa hurriedly knelt down to grab her torn purse. "This is insane," she said breathlessly, stuffing loose items back inside with shaking hands. "Your dog just destroyed my bag." Max remained completely still beside the scattered papers, his eyes fixed on the key instead of Vanessa. Ryan picked it up slowly between his fingers. It looked like a tiny storage locker key, the kind attached to a numbered metal tag. There was no number on this one, just a small scratch across the surface like someone had tried to scrape it away. "Why was this inside your purse?" Ryan asked quietly. Vanessa froze for half a second before forcing a tired laugh. "It is probably an old gym locker key or something." "Ryan, seriously, look around. Your dog ripped apart your office." Ryan looked down at the mess covering the hardwood floor. She was right. Contracts worth millions of dollars lay crumpled beneath overturned folders. One of the backup drives had cracked open near the desk leg. Max had never caused destruction like this before, not even as a puppy. The sight made Ryan's chest tighten with frustration. Vanessa stood up slowly, her voice softer now. "I have tried so hard with him," she whispered. "I stopped staying over as much because he gets anxious. I stopped bringing friends here because I never know how he will react. I even changed perfumes because you said maybe certain smells upset him." Her eyes filled with tears. But nothing changes. Ryan opened his mouth to defend Max, but the words would not come. The apartment no longer felt like home anymore. Every day revolved around tension, strange incidents, interrupted sleep, arguments, damaged belongings. He loved Max more than anything, yet exhaustion had slowly started replacing certainty. The next morning, things only became worse. Ryan woke to loud knocking outside the apartment door. A middle-aged neighbor from across the hallway stood there holding a coffee-stained grocery bag. "Your dog scared my daughter last night," the woman snapped. Immediately, that animal was barking and slamming against the door around 1 in the morning. Ryan apologized repeatedly while Max sat silently behind him. The dog did not bark once during the entire conversation. He only watched the woman leave before slowly walking back toward the office again. By afternoon, Vanessa finally said what Ryan feared most. "I cannot keep doing this." Her voice cracked as she stood beside the kitchen island holding her car keys tightly in one hand. "I am tired of feeling nervous in your apartment all the time." Ryan rubbed both hands across his face, mentally exhausted. "Vanessa." "No," she interrupted softly. "I love you, but this is not healthy anymore. Your entire life revolves around protecting that dog." The words hit harder than Ryan expected because some part of him feared they were true. Max had been with him longer than any relationship, longer than most friendships. Ryan trusted the dog more than almost anyone alive. But now every single day felt consumed by stress and confusion. Vanessa stepped closer carefully, keeping distance from Max. "I am not asking you to abandon him," she whispered. "But maybe he needs professional behavioral training. Maybe somewhere quieter, somewhere away from all this pressure." Ryan looked toward Max lying near the office doorway. The dog appeared exhausted now, his ears lowered, his eyes dull with sadness instead of fear. For a brief moment, Ryan almost crossed the room to sit beside him like he always did after difficult days. But then his gaze landed on the destroyed office again. The ripped documents, the broken drive, Vanessa's torn purse, the complaints from neighbors. Ryan felt trapped between loyalty and the possibility that something inside Max had changed. Late that evening, after hours of silence inside the apartment, Ryan finally picked up his phone and searched for a temporary animal behavior facility 30 miles outside Seattle. When the confirmation screen appeared for a 7-day intake appointment, Max slowly stood up from across the room and walked backward away from Ryan, as if he somehow understood exactly what was about to happen. The drive to the behavioral facility felt longer than 30 miles. Rain streaked across the windshield in uneven lines while Ryan kept one hand tight on the steering wheel and the other resting near Max's leash in the passenger seat. The German Shepherd had not made a single sound since leaving the apartment. No barking, no whining. He only stared out the window at the passing gray landscape, as if memorizing it. Ryan tried convincing himself this was temporary. 1 week of evaluation, professional help, maybe medication, maybe stress therapy, anything to bring life back to normal. But the silence inside the truck felt unbearable. At a stoplight outside Tacoma, Ryan glanced sideways and noticed something strange. Max was not looking outside anymore. The dog was staring directly at the small leather notebook sticking halfway out of Ryan's coat pocket. Ryan frowned. It was the same notebook he used for startup account passwords and investor contact information. Max had ignored it for years. Yet now the dog's entire body tensed the moment Ryan touched it. "What now, buddy?" Ryan muttered tiredly. The light turned green. Max suddenly shoved his nose hard against Ryan's elbow, almost knocking the notebook onto the floorboard. "Stop!" Ryan snapped instinctively, pulling it away. Max immediately lowered his ears and leaned back against the seat. The reaction made Ryan feel guilty almost instantly. By the time they reached the facility, the rain had become heavier. A young employee named Claire greeted them beneath the covered entrance with a clipboard tucked against her chest. She looked barely 25, wearing muddy boots and a faded navy sweatshirt with the shelter logo printed across the front. "Behavioral intake?" she asked gently. Ryan nodded while Max stepped slowly out of the truck. Claire crouched carefully a few feet away, clearly expecting nervous aggression from the large dog. Instead, Max ignored her completely and walked one slow circle around Ryan before sitting directly in front of him. The movement looked oddly deliberate, almost protective. Claire studied the dog quietly while Ryan explained everything. The pacing, the destruction, the growling around Vanessa, the office incidents, the neighbors' complaints. Claire listened without interrupting, but her expression changed slightly when Ryan mentioned the damaged purse and office drawer. "Did he destroy anything valuable before your girlfriend moved in?" she asked casually. Ryan hesitated. "Not really. Any aggression toward strangers before recently?" "No." Claire glanced down at Max again. The dog remained perfectly calm despite the unfamiliar environment, but one detail caught her attention immediately. Max kept shifting his body whenever Ryan's coat pocket faced outward, as though he was trying to block the notebook from view. Claire slowly stood back up. "That is interesting," she murmured softly. Ryan rubbed tired eyes with one hand. "Look, I know how this sounds. I just need help figuring out what happened to him." Claire nodded politely and led them toward the intake office. But before Ryan reached the door, his phone buzzed loudly in his pocket. "Vanessa," he answered immediately. "Hey." Her voice sounded rushed and nervous. "Ryan, did you take your black notebook with you?" Ryan instinctively touched his coat pocket. "Yeah." "What?" A strange pause followed. "No reason," Vanessa replied too quickly. "I just thought I saw it on the kitchen counter earlier." Ryan frowned slightly. "No, it has been with me all morning." Another pause. Then her voice softened. "Okay, just checking." The call ended. Ryan stared down at the screen for several seconds while cold rain dripped from the edge of the shelter roof nearby. Claire had heard enough of the conversation to notice the shift in his expression. "Mr. Miller," she said carefully, "I have worked with stress dogs for years. Fear usually looks chaotic. Confusion usually looks random. But your dog's behavior sounds focused." Ryan looked at her silently. Claire lowered her voice, almost like he is reacting to one specific thing. Ryan slowly turned toward Max. At that exact moment, the dog stood up abruptly and pressed his nose directly against the pocket holding the notebook again while staring toward Ryan's phone screen where Vanessa's missed call notification was still glowing. Ryan could not stop staring at Max after Claire's words. The rain outside hammered softly against the shelter windows while the German Shepherd remained pressed against his coat pocket, refusing to move away from the notebook. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Then Claire gently asked, "Would you mind showing me what is inside that notebook?" Ryan hesitated before pulling it out. The black leather cover looked worn from years of daily use. Inside were handwritten passwords, investor numbers, shipping codes, and backup authentication phrases connected to Ryan's software company. Claire flipped through a few pages carefully before pausing midway. "This page," she said quietly. "Was this torn recently?" Ryan frowned. A small jagged corner was missing from one of the pages near the middle. He had never noticed it before. Claire handed the notebook back slowly. "And your dog only reacts like this around certain objects connected to work." Ryan thought about the office drawer, the contracts, the backup drives, Vanessa's purse near the papers, the notebook. Suddenly his phone buzzed again with another message from Vanessa. This time it was not a call, just a text. "Did you already leave the notebook there?" Ryan felt his stomach tighten instantly. Why did she care so much about the notebook? Before he could answer, another realization struck him. The missing page. Ryan quickly flipped through the notebook again until he reached the torn section. His breathing slowed. One of the missing entries contained temporary access codes connected to an investor presentation scheduled for the following week. Codes only two people had ever seen, Ryan and Vanessa. A cold wave of unease crept through him. "Can I borrow your computer for a second?" he asked Claire suddenly. Minutes later, they sat inside the intake office while Max stayed glued beside Ryan's chair. Ryan logged into his cloud account and checked recent login activity connected to the company servers. At first, everything looked normal. Then one unfamiliar access point appeared 3 nights earlier at exactly 1:13 a.m. The same night Max dragged the office drawer across the floor. Ryan clicked deeper into the report. A file transfer had been attempted from inside his apartment. Network using one of the temporary backup codes from the missing notebook page. The transfer failed halfway through because the credentials became corrupted. Ryan's chest tightened painfully. Corrupted. Suddenly, he remembered the shredded paper Max destroyed days earlier. The broken backup drive. The chewed edge of the notebook page. Max had not been randomly destroying office materials. The dog had been targeting specific files connected to company access. Ryan slowly opened another security log. A second failed transfer attempt appeared from 2 nights earlier. Again interrupted. Again corrupted. Ryan's hands started trembling over the keyboard. "Oh my God," he whispered under his breath. Claire stayed silent while Ryan's mind raced backward through every strange moment over the past month. Max knocking over Vanessa's purse, blocking the office door, guarding the desk drawer, watching the notebook, refusing to leave the hallway at night. The dog was never reacting to Vanessa herself. He was reacting to the items she carried. Ryan opened one final account report connected to the company cloud archive. A hidden draft email appeared in deleted folders, timestamped just after midnight several nights earlier. Attached were confidential investor documents prepared for a competing startup based in San Francisco. The sender name froze Ryan completely. Vanessa Cole. His vision blurred for a second. Max slowly rested his head against Ryan's leg beneath the desk, as if sensing the shift in his breathing. Suddenly, every terrifying moment inside the apartment rearranged itself inside Ryan's mind with horrifying clarity. Max had never been dangerous, never unstable, never jealous. The dog had spent weeks desperately trying to stop someone Ryan trusted from stealing everything he had built. Ryan looked down at Max with tears forming in his eyes while the dog quietly stared back at him without anger, without fear, without resentment. And in that crushing moment, Ryan realized he had almost abandoned the only one who had been protecting him the entire time. Ryan sat motionless in the small shelter office long after the computer screen dimmed black. Rainwater dripped slowly from the edge of his jacket onto the tile floor beneath him, but he barely noticed anymore. His mind kept replaying every moment from the past month with painful clarity. Max blocking the office doorway. Max dragging the drawer away from the desk. Max knocking Vanessa's purse onto the floor. The elevator incident. The hallway pacing at night. None of it had been random. None of it had been aggression. The dog had been trying to protect him while Ryan kept treating those warnings like a problem to fix. A slow ache spread through his chest so heavily that he struggled to breathe around it. Beside his chair, Max gently rested his chin against Ryan's knee without making a sound. That quiet gesture somehow hurt more than barking ever could. Ryan looked down at the graying fur around the dog's eyes and suddenly remembered the night they first met nearly 6 years earlier. It had been freezing outside Denver. Ryan was sleeping in the front seat of his truck after losing both his apartment and his construction business within the same month. He had stopped behind a gas station around 2 in the morning when he spotted a skinny German Shepherd curled beside a dumpster shaking from cold. Max had looked terrified back then. Exhausted. Starving. Ryan bought 2 hot dogs from the gas station and sat on the curb feeding pieces to the trembling dog under flickering neon lights. From that night forward, Max never left him. Through failed jobs, through panic attacks, through lonely motel rooms and endless highway drives. The dog stayed beside him through every miserable chapter of his life without asking for anything except a place near him. And now Ryan realized he almost repaid that loyalty by abandoning him in a shelter because he trusted the wrong person. His throat tightened painfully. "I yelled at you," Ryan whispered hoarsely while staring down at Max. "You were trying to help me, and I thought you were broken." Max slowly lifted his head at the sound of Ryan's voice. His tail tapped once against the floor. Just once. Small. Careful. As though he was still unsure whether Ryan was angry. That tiny movement shattered something inside him completely. Ryan leaned forward suddenly and wrapped both arms around the dog's neck. Max immediately pressed closer against him with a deep, shaky sigh that sounded almost human after days of tension and confusion. Claire quietly stepped out of the office to give them privacy, but before leaving she glanced back once and noticed tears sliding down Ryan's face while the German Shepherd stayed perfectly still in his arms. Ryan could not remember the last time he cried like this. Not after losing his company. Not after sleeping in his truck. Not even after his father's funeral years earlier. This felt different because guilt sat underneath every memory now. He remembered Max slowly backing away when Ryan booked the intake appointment. The silence in the truck. The way the dog stared out the window like he already understood he was being sent away. Max had known Ryan no longer trusted him. Yet even after all of that, the dog still tried protecting the notebook at the shelter. Still stayed beside him. Still trusted him enough to lean into his arms now. Ryan finally pulled back slightly and looked directly into Max's tired eyes. "I am so sorry," he whispered. "I should have listened to you." Max nudged Ryan's hand gently with his nose before lowering his head against Ryan's chest again. Ryan wiped both eyes hard with the sleeve of his jacket and suddenly stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly across the floor. Claire looked up from the hallway in surprise. Ryan grabbed the notebook, his truck keys, and Max's leash in one motion. His face no longer looked confused. It looked sick with realization. "I need to get home," he said urgently. "Right now." The drive back to Seattle felt completely different this time. Ryan no longer saw Max as a problem sitting silently beside him in the truck. Now every small movement from the aging German Shepherd carried heartbreaking meaning. Whenever Ryan slowed at intersections, Max automatically lifted his head toward the black notebook resting securely on the dashboard, then relaxed again once he saw Ryan notice it. The dog had spent weeks guarding something Ryan never even realized was in danger. Halfway home, Ryan pulled into a quiet gas station off Interstate 5 just as the rain finally began easing. He stepped out of the truck, disappeared inside for several minutes, then returned carrying 2 things. A fresh cheeseburger wrapped in paper and a brand new red leather collar with a small silver plate attached to it. Max watched carefully while Ryan sat back inside the cab. For a moment, neither of them moved. The truck engine hummed softly around them, while passing headlights reflected across the wet parking lot outside. Then Ryan slowly removed the old worn collar Max had used for years. The faded nylon strap carried scratches from camping trips, road travel, construction sites, and countless nights sleeping in cheap motels beside Ryan during harder years. Ryan ran his thumb gently across the old buckle before setting it carefully on the center console instead of throwing it away. "You earned better than this," he whispered quietly. Max stayed perfectly still while Ryan fastened the new collar around his neck. The silver tag caught the overhead gas station light for just a second. On the front, Ryan had asked the cashier to engrave 2 simple words using the store's machine while waiting for the receipt. "Trusted always." Max lowered his head slightly as Ryan adjusted the strap, and for the first time in weeks the tension finally disappeared from the dog's body completely. Ryan handed him half the cheeseburger piece by piece while resting his elbow near the steering wheel. Max ate slowly, carefully, never taking his eyes off Ryan for long. It no longer felt like the anxious staring from before. It felt relieved, Back at the apartment building after midnight, Ryan did not rush upstairs immediately. Instead, he sat in the parked truck with the lights off, thinking through everything that needed to happen next. Calls to his legal team, security reports, password resets, investor warnings. But before any of that, he reached over and unlocked his phone. Vanessa had sent 12 unread messages. Some angry, some emotional, some demanding explanations. Ryan stared at them for several silent seconds before deleting every single one without replying. Max watched the screen carefully from the passenger seat. Then something remarkable happened. The dog slowly lowered himself down across the seat for the first time all day and closed his eyes. Ryan froze. He had not seen Max fully relax in over a month. Not once. The constant pacing, the hallway guarding, the restless nights, all gone. As if the dog somehow understood the danger had finally passed. Ryan swallowed hard against the pressure building in his chest again. "You knew before I did," he murmured softly. "You tried to tell me the whole time." When they finally reached the apartment upstairs, Ryan noticed the difference immediately. The place felt quiet again. Not empty. Peaceful. Max walked through each room slowly without tension. No frantic pacing. No watching the doors. No hovering near the office. He simply checked the apartment once before returning calmly to the living room. Ryan opened the office drawer and removed every confidential file connected to the company while Max lay nearby beneath the lamplight. Then Ryan carried all the documents into a fireproof safe inside his bedroom closet and changed every access code in the company system one by one while Max remained resting peacefully on the rug outside the door. Hours earlier, Ryan almost left him behind forever. Now the dog quietly watched over the room one last time before letting out a long, deep breath and finally falling asleep with his head resting beside the bedroom doorway, as though he no longer needed to stand guard anymore. 3 months later, the apartment no longer sounded the same. The tension that once lived in every hallway and doorway had disappeared, replaced by quieter things Ryan had almost forgotten how to notice. The soft clicking of Max's paws across the hardwood floor each morning. The low hum of coffee brewing before sunrise. Rain tapping gently against the windows while the city lights blurred across downtown Seattle below. Life had not magically become perfect after that night. Ryan still spent weeks dealing with legal teams, security investigators, and financial damage caused by the attempted data theft. Some investors walked away permanently. Several projects had to be rebuilt from scratch. But strangely, Ryan no longer measured his losses the same way. Because every evening when he unlocked the apartment door after work, Max still met him there without fail. Not pacing anxiously anymore. Not guarding the office. Just waiting quietly beside the entrance with calm eyes and a slow wag of his tail. Ryan started noticing small things about the dog he had overlooked for years. The way Max always nudged the bedroom door closed before storms because Ryan slept badly during thunder. The way he rested beside the window whenever Ryan worked too late, as if silently reminding him not to disappear into stress again. The way the old German shepherd still followed him room to room despite everything that happened, never holding fear or resentment against him for almost giving him away. One Saturday morning, Ryan drove Max 2 hours north into the mountains outside Leavenworth where they used to camp during harder years when neither of them had much money. The lake there looked exactly the same as Ryan remembered. Pine trees swayed gently above the water while cold mountain air carried the smell of wet earth and cedar through the campground. Max moved slower now because of his age, but the moment Ryan unclipped the leash near the shoreline, the dog trotted forward with surprising energy across the grass like he had returned to somewhere sacred. Ryan sat on an old wooden bench overlooking the lake while Max wandered nearby, sniffing through patches of wildflowers and damp soil. For the first time in months, Ryan allowed himself to sit without checking his phone every few minutes. No investor calls. No passwords. No crisis management. Just silence. Max eventually returned carrying a small stick in his mouth, the same simple game they used to play years ago beside highways, truck stops, and cheap campgrounds during the roughest chapter of Ryan's life. Ryan laughed softly under his breath before throwing the stick across the shoreline. Max chased after it immediately, his red collar flashing brightly beneath the afternoon sun. Trusted always. Ryan watched the words move farther across the grass and suddenly realized something painful and beautiful at the same time. During the worst moments of his life, he had spent years believing He rescued Max beside that gas station in Denver. But sitting there now, watching the old dog happily carrying the stick back toward him with graying fur and tired eyes still full of devotion, Ryan finally understood the truth. Max had been rescuing him all along. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the mountains, Ryan packed up the truck while Max climbed into the passenger seat without hesitation, resting comfortably against the worn leather like he had 1,000 times before. Ryan started the engine, then paused for a moment after noticing something beside the gear shift. The old faded collar from years earlier still rested there exactly where he left it that rainy night outside the shelter. Ryan picked it up carefully, running his thumb across the scratches and worn edges once more before smiling quietly to himself. Some warnings sound like barking. Some love looks like loyalty. And sometimes, the one protecting your future is the one you almost left behind.